Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack and Dave here. Looking forward to this podcast. It's the North London Derby edition. We're going to be discussing how Spurs can get the win over Arsenal this weekend. I've actually transitioned from my desk next to the window, and I'm going to be recording this North London Derby in front of my podcast, continuing the very sort of blank themes and backgrounds behind me. And if you wanted to think I am kidnapped, you're welcome to go as far into the deep end as you'd like. But Dave, looking forward to this one. And yes, North London Derby version. We have to prepare ourselves, build our armor against the Arsenal.
Yeah, look, Jack, this is the one that every Tottenham fan, look, even every Arsenal fan, right? They look forward to. They look as soon as the fixtures are out, they want to know when the home and the away game is. And look, the build up to it is always intense. It's massive, and the bragging rights. We gave them, territory on our patch. We took them in, said, look, we feel sorry for you. We'll give you a place to stay. And ever since then, they've just shit on that. So it's about time now. We've got the right manager and the right mentality in the team to be able to go in there and gain some respect off them. So that's what I think we're going to do this weekend.
Mm.
I just wonder, Jack, I wonder what Mikel Arteta was doing this week. We've seen the documentary. We've seen some of the weird stuff he gets up to, right? The light bulb moment, the
Fair.
speakers with the "You Never Walk Alone." I wonder, did he have Angie's version of Robbie Williams' "Angels" playing on that, Jack? Maybe to get them used to it. I'm not sure, but he's a weirdo.
Yeah, from light bulbs to weird discussions of, getting to the training ground, with just odd metaphors and, as well, he's a bit of a guy who's guilty of the metaphor when you just don't really need one. You're just trying to get a simple basic answer from a person and he's just throwing in, all these metaphors and similes and it's just like, man, I just asked you, like whether you just decided to make the change because the guy was dropped because he was out of form and, he gives all these random, soliloquies. It's just gets a little exhausting with Arteta, but this is the week where we get to use it all against him. We can actually, compile all the evidence. Whereas Ange, has turned into practically the most likable guy in the
Yeah.
Premier League. I would say Arteta at no stage has really made himself very likable around the Premier League. I think only Arsenal fans have in any way probably liked him. Maybe probably at some stage the neutral kind of respected his tactics, but I don't think anybody's ever liked Arteta from his sort of antics on the sidelines as well. I think he's always gotten away with it far too much. I wish he got sent off more for how many times he encroaches onto the field or, is trying to kind of get into the referee's ear. He's just a bit of a nuisance. He's a bit of a nonsense, if you will. I just kind of, get a little sick of him, and I'm looking forward to Big Ange, taking it to him this time. We have had some decent, results against Arteta in the past, but this last season, not so much. And we need to get that smug, smile or whatever it is, off that Lego man's face going into this one. If everybody, please smash that like button for us. Get your comments in down below how we can destroy the Lego man and the Arsenal this weekend. But Dave, kind of the first question that I sort of had going into this one was, I feel like last season, right? Spurs fans didn't really have all that much confidence. We actually went into it with sort of a lot of fear going into these North London derbies. How do you feel going into it this time around? And if you are more confident, why is that?
Yeah, look, Jack, I actually feel very confident going into this one, and look, I know I shouldn't. I get the history of, us at their stadium, how bad we are away from home. I get all that, but this time I feel so much more confident, and there's a number of reasons why, Jack. I think for the last 10, 11 years we've sort of had the same group of players, and for a period of that time they were used to being beaten up by Arsenal, and come towards the ends of that, the likes of the Dyers and the Davies and that who've played in the recent ones, they just haven't put in any heart, any desire, anything like that, and they've been absolutely played around, and it's been easy for Arsenal. But now we've got a change in leadership. We've got a younger team as well, so we're more energetic, we're more hungry, we're more athletic, we're quicker than ever before. So I think, all of them things, the reduced to the age of the squad, which means we're better on the football pitch. That's evident. I've always said you get rid of the likes of the old guard, you bring in young, fresh, hungry players, you'll see a different team on the pitch. But it's the mentality, it's the change in leadership. You've got Son, Madison, Romero. Look at the way they're celebrating winning games. You've got Romero nearly tearing the head off Emerson at the end of the Sheffield United game. The two of them wanted to see who could be most aggressive. You've got Sonny, absolutely great leader. Everyone loves him, pushing Richarlison forward to get his praises. It's creating that camaraderie, and I think we're going in there with a better vibe around the squad than what we have done in years gone by. Years gone by, we've gone in there fractured. We've gone in there looking to contain them. So that's another thing, Jack. The style of play that we're going to approach this with. For the last 3 years, 4 years, we've gone in there looking to contain them. Well, Postecoglou will not change his methods and he will not change up his tactics. We're going in there to play the exact same way we have done the last few weeks. And for
Yeah.
me, I think that's why them few different combinations is why I'm confident going into this one and I expect the result.
For me, Dave, I feel like there are a few different reasons why Spurs fans might be going into this one a bit more confident. You're kind of looking at the majority of the areas in the pitch are kind of at least the starting 11 is looking a lot more solid, right? We have two center backs that we actually have confidence in. Probably been a few years since we could actually say that. We actually have some fullbacks that we also have some
Yeah.
confidence in. And also, in case maybe there were an injury to even, let's say, the right side, to a fullback, we're not just immediately doomed, picking between an Aurier or a Doherty or whatever it might have been back then, and it always felt like Spurs just were really quite short in maybe those fullback areas. Now we have Udoji, who looks like one of the best fullbacks in the Premier League. We have Emerson, who I think is serving as a very good defensive option for us in case we need it. Also, let's say Pedro Porro just isn't the option on the day. Emerson offers you something very different. Spurs have usually, lacked that kind of, choice where, you have two guys who are both good in their own right, but offer two good things, and they're very differently. And I think that's a good strength that we might have. We have a goalkeeper who can actually now play maybe more of that modern style. That wasn't really the case with Lloris. It felt like he did need a lot of protection of a backline in front of him, bodies get in front of shots, as well as also taking a bit of that possession burden away from him, when you're being pressed, as well. You look at last season, Hugo kind of did lead us into a lot of the goals being conceded, not even just from just simple bad defending, but when we were being pressed, Hugo was kind of targeted. I remember in Ketia, a few different times last season, just sort of caught him out by just getting onto his passes or just catching out his loose touches. And Vicario is going to be very different this time around. I dare them to try to press us now with Big Vic. I think he's going to absolutely catch them out. You look at the midfield. Yes, I think Højbjerg has been an absolute servant for us, and you look though at maybe Skippy too. It's just been two guys that hardworking industrious midfielders, but lack that creativity that we really needed actually in these big games. Guys that can really step up, go toe to toe with what is a very good midfield with Arsenal. So you have Rice, Odegaard. Now you have maybe a choice of, I guess, Havertz or Fabio Vieira. We need to have a midfield that can stand up and match that. I think we do right now. We have Basuma, Madison, and the choice of Papa Matasar. And then eventually, down the road, someone like a Bentancur could also be, among our choices. The front line has always been strong for Tottenham. I think that's kind of, been a consistent one for us. We've never really, I think, been worried about that department, but I feel like it's more in those midfield and defensive areas as well as goalkeeper that Spurs fans feel a lot more confident. Style of play as well. We know we're not going to rely on one sort of type of way to score with, getting into Harry Kane's feet, kind of relying on the counterattacks or the transitions. And also maybe two, Arsenal have had a weird kind of unconvincing start, to this season. They haven't looked as good as maybe thought, plenty thought they would be. Plenty, maybe saw them as a title contender, right? I guess that was sort of the step up that they wanted this season. They don't really look like a title contender, at least right now. Very early days, of course, and this could be a huge momentous game and, sort of getting a lot of confidence and changing the outlook of your season. But right now, I would say there's a few different reasons Spurs fans might go into this one more confident than actually they did last season under an Antonio Conte or even a Jose Mourinho.
I want to touch on a couple of things you said there. I remember Hugo Lloris, he spilled one in for Gabriel Jesus to tap in the home game, or was it the away game? And then in the home game, they pressed us, make us go long, turned the ball over, went back up and scored a couple of goals that maybe Hugo Lloris could have done better with as well. So his distribution in that game killed us. So you're absolutely spot on with that. With Big Vic, they can come and press us, but he can alleviate that pressure with his feet, with his distribution, which is going to be a massive help rather than us just pump it long looking to scrap. So that'll be a huge, huge benefit. You're absolutely spot on there. The other thing, Jack, you said was about, them being title contenders. They can't deal with that pressure. They folded quicker than a camping table last season. This season they've already choking. They're already choking. They can't deal with the pressure of being title contenders.
Second question for you here, Dave. Going into this North London derby, it's been a long time since we've gone into a North London derby without a defensive or sort of counter-attacking emphasis or theme to our style of play. Could you see this match being more exciting, open-ended, or could it actually be over quickly, right? Given the fact that we both play such high risk, high reward type of styles of play. There can be red cards, which seem to be a theme in these North London derbies.
Mm.
Do you see this being a more exciting. They're always exciting, right? But could you see this being a different type of game because maybe the styles of play are actually going to be different this time around?
I think you're going to go back to some of the derbies I witnessed as a kid on the Harry Redknapp,
Wow.
on the Martin Yole high scoring derbies. I'm actually envisioning all this week, Jack. Remember the 3-2 in 2010 on the Harry Redknapp, Yunus Kabul winner?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting visions of. I think we can nick this one. I think there will be goals in this game. Like I said, it comes back to being able to compete with them on a technical level. Any one of our players could put the ball in the back of the net, as already demonstrated this season. And to be fair to them, they've got goal scorers planted throughout their team as well. So, I do see this being an absolute classic, Jack,
Hmm.
because look, Arteta. Do you know what, Jack? It'd be
Classic.
interesting to see whether Lego Head changes anything, because he does see himself as a bit of a Pep. So, like, you look at Arteta, right? He thinks of himself as a Pep Guardiola. We call him the B-Tech Pep, and that should be his nickname, by the way. But he likes to tinker with things a bit like Guardiola at times. And in years gone by, I think he's actually benefited from us approaching these games more scary than, and I think he's benefited from that because he's been able to send his team, just go at Tottenham, just press them, and we'll be able to beat them. And I think he's sort of benefited from that. Whereas I think this time around, the whole world knows we're going in there and playing our style of football. So it's then up to Arteta to adjust to us. So it'll be very interesting to see whether he can make that adjustment. And if he does it come to the detriment of Arsenal on the day? Because he does like to think of himself as a very clever tactician. In these big games where tactics get highlighted the most, he wants that praise from maybe a Roy Keane or a Gary Neville in the studio, where they're saying, "Oh, look, he done this today. He's an absolute genius." Well, that ain't gonna wash this time round, Jacko,
Mm.
because Postecoglou ball's about to rock up. We're about to rock right through that Emirates, steamroll all the way through, right out the other end, back up the Seven Sisters High Road, Jack. Back to White Hart Lane to celebrate. But honestly, I think that would be the difference. The fact that he'll have to adjust his tactics because we ain't doing it.
Yeah, you think Postecoglou is going to have to give him something different to think about this time around. He is going to make him nervous. Before he had, a bit of familiarity with sort of the styles of Jose, the styles of Nuno, the styles of also as well kind of an Antonio Conte. He kind of could set up in a similar way, think about how Spurs play in a similar type of manner to try to sort of unlock them. Yes, maybe formations were different, but styles of play were quite similar. And he could kind of think about which players too he could target. A lot of the players didn't change very much. There was a lot of features of Eric Dyer, Ben Davies. You look at the midfield, didn't really change all that much over those years. Bit of the same attack as well. He could kind of isolate, Kane, isolate Son, really target those guys knowing they were the only threat. Whereas now, pretty much that whole Spurs lineup is different. The manager is different. Everything is different. And it is going to make the Lego man think twice, think three times, think four times, think, maybe more, too many times. And he might end up making a big mistake. What I am a little bit worried about, though, and I'd be curious if you can calm my nerves in this case, Dave, because yes, we spoke about why Spurs fans are going into this far more confident than maybe they usually have in previous years. But given that we do play this sort of high risk, high reward type of play, they have, quick runners, they have good forwards in the case of, Saka, Martinelli, etc. And they even have some decent backups as well. It just feels like, we could get caught out. It's, a lot of energy, a lot of sort of adrenaline. And even if we were to go a goal down, I wouldn't be completely, completely distraught. Like, I still think we could easily get back into it. But that's where I just get a little worried. Like, could this be a basketball game type of scenario? And with those type of games, it leaves you, nervous. It leaves you just all over the place because it feels like each team, is capable of scoring in any minute and that any pass could just all of a sudden unlock a defense defense, it
Mm.
always does leave you a bit nervous as a fan, especially considering you're not, in your own stadium. You don't have the backing of your own crowd as well. How do you see it? Can you calm my nerves in that fashion? Because I could just see it, where Spurs play quite well, but maybe Arsenal just happen to catch us out. They go 2-0 up quite quickly. Do you see what I'm kind of getting from? How can you
Yeah.
calm me down? In that regard.
I do. Look, Jack, first of all, the change in leadership, we ain't going in there scared. Before we've gone into them places scared, already worried about nation, and that's been done through, the man just speaking in the press, the players being beaten up by Arsenal in the past, and, the tactics all worried about them, worried about them. There ain't any of that this week. Postecoglou's focused on what we're doing, how we can break them down, how we're going to get joy. One thing I'll give them, even though they're not playing well, they're not giving up a lot of chances. Their defense is fairly sturdy. So we do have a work cut out in that department. But as you know, Jack, I've always said Tottenham do not have problems scoring goals. We'll find a way. I think the difference this year is I think we can compete with them in midfield, where I think we've been overrun in years gone by in these games because we've had very similar type of players in there who are more ball winners than guys that are going to get you on the ball and be able to beat people or manipulate the ball in very tight spaces. But also, I think we've got the back line, Jack. That's the most important for me. You look at someone like Saka, right? That's the danger man. That's the one everyone wants to keep quiet. Well, he's coming up against Destiny Adoji. He hasn't come up against him before. That guy stopped absolutely everyone coming down that side. No one is targeting that side. Why? Because it's absolutely rock solid. Not only can Destiny Adoji defend and they're not getting any joy, but they're also worried about him taking the ball off them and springing attack down that side. We've got a few assists from that side
That's
this
true.
season. So they're worried about that. You look at the centre back partnership. It's the best I've seen it since Toby and Jan, and it's what I've been campaigning for. Different
Nice.
mentality. Romero will be pumped up for it. This is a guy that's played a World Cup final. Walking into the toilet bowl ain't gonna, scare this guy. You've got Mickey Van der Ven. Okay, might be a few nerves there, but I think he'll settle. If it's Eddie and Katie up front, I ain't worried. The big thing for me is that right hand side. That's where teams have targeted us. You've had Brentford target that side. You've had United target that side. Get that side on us. I think Burnley got joy down that side as well, if I remember correctly. So that's where I think Ange
Yeah.
Postecoglou has the big decision, Jack. Does he go with Pedro Porro for obvious reasons, what we've seen, what he can offer us on the ball? Does he go with a more defensive solid player in someone like Emerson?
Is that
That's the big call. Even if he does go with Porro, can he defend? Can he show us what he has
yeah.
been showing us? But there's still glitches there. But what do you think on that, Jack?
I just I find
Have I
myself
used your nerves?
I find myself caught in two minds there because you want to put yourself in Ange's shoes and then you have to think, how Ange thinks, right? And he seems like the guy that's always about I don't want to concede anything, to this
Mm,
side. I don't want to think about what they can, of course I have to acknowledge what they are capable of, but I don't want to concede, my own sort of style of play or my own sort of capabilities, in fear of what they can actually do to
mm,
us. He seems almost the antithesis of that type of mentality. And I actually find myself to be sort of in the camp of, being quite fearful of what the opposition can do,
mm,
try to account for it, try to stifle it. But he seems like a guy that's like, why don't we just match it with our own firepower? Why don't we just match it with our own threats? And that's where I could see it, being an intense as well as a very hectic sort of game. Because if it goes with the Pedro Porro, you could see it being a very sort of end-to-end type of game where, yes, maybe a Martinelli or Trossard might get in behind. Pedro Porro might, open up some space. They could, cut inside. He might not be reading it, as well as an Emerson could. But you also think about Pedro Porro, what he can do in possession and how he can hurt them.
mm,
He can play a pass in behind that pretty much no one else can, right? You think about that high back line of Arsenal's. We wouldn't be able to play, some of those balls in behind for Sonny if Pedro Porro is on the bench, right? We would then only
mm,
be relying on Madison or Basuma to be able to do that, or maybe a Papa Matasar. But with Pedro Porro, you sort of get that extra angle because he's coming at it from sort of a wide area, or he's coming
mm,
at it from sort of maybe a bit more of an inverted position. But still, I think having Pedro Porro, you offer so many more threats in behind, so
mm,
many more threats, kind of going forward that you can kind of make Arteta start to think twice, make him start to kind of worry a little
mm.
bit. So if I were in Ange's shoes and I had to think like Ange does, I feel like he's going with Pedro Porro, and that could make this a scary game because it could be, giving Arsenal some chances. Because, yes, I think he's improving a lot defensively, but is he ready for this sort of scenario, against a very, very good winger, Martinelli or Trossard? I think he is, but I think there will be some moments where he might get caught out a little bit. Whereas an Emerson is the safer option, but Ange has never come across as the guy that goes for the safer option. Dave, to answer your question.
Mm. No, I don't think he will come across as or use the safe option. I think he will go with Pedro Porro. But look, Jack, it's just about surviving that first 20 minutes. You got to expect that Arsenal are gonna, use that home crowd, that noise, that animosity towards Tottenham. You got to expect Arsenal to want to play off that for the first 10, 15 minutes and look to come at us. Also, that silly song that they played, North London is ours, that stupid song. They'll be absolutely boiled off that as well. So it's going to be absolutely pumping. And it's just about, can we handle that nerves? Because with Man United, there was that nervous 20 minutes.
Mm,
Pedro Porro
good point.
actually gave away a lot of possession in that 20 minutes, along with a few other players. And we were lucky to not be caught. If they did take their chances on another day,
Good point.
that result might have been different. So we have to get through that first 20 minutes unscathed. But what I would say is the difference this time around than other times before is we're going on the press. We are going to hunt them down rather than the ones being hunted, right? We sat back. We let
Hmm.
them come on to us. We let them dictate. We just sat back, tried to put up a wall for 20 minutes. We ain't going to do that this time. We're going to press them. We're going to look to force them into mistakes. Jack, this isn't Andrew's first rodeo. This guy's gone to the what's it, where you go into Rangers and vice versa when Rangers come to Celtic. You're not allowed to bring away fans. It's only home fans only. That's how intense it is. And he's gone into the Ibrox and he's smacked Rangers up. They've been 3-0 up, easy peasy for the last 30, 40 minutes of the game. So Ange does know how to handle these types of intense atmospheres, Jack. He
That's
has
true.
a handle on these occasions.
Yeah, and they're not even allowed to bring their away fans into those games either. So you're kind of all on your own there in that scenario, and that's pretty
Yeah.
much known as, while the Scottish League seems to be, yeah, kind of looked down upon for some reason. And any regardless of that, it feels like that derby is seen as one of the most intense and one of the best still in the world, and it always will be, right? And you have to think that Ange, being a very good competitor and being a good survivor of those derbies, he's had a pretty good record in them. Yeah, definitely is going to go into this, with some, at least some encouragement, some experience in that regard, and that gives me definitely some confidence. But you spoke about that first 20 minutes and kind of going about it unscathed. Completely agree with you. That's where kind of my worries do lie. Is how does that first 20 minutes go for us? Because both teams are just going to be pumping full of adrenaline. They're going to be pressing each other, all the way to the keeper. And you just think there's going to be those moments of quality that we both possess where someone just, turns their man and all of a sudden, it's a 3-on-1 and you could see the game just getting out of hand for either side, right? Maybe we end up being 2-0 up in the first 20 minutes, all of a sudden, if we keep our nerve. I'm excited for this game. I just think it's going to be a crazy one, if anything, because just the styles of play are so different, and also the managers seem like ones that don't want to concede a lot, right? They want to, back their own guys and being able to. Another question for you here, Dave. Spurs fans last season, sadly, often compared ourselves with Arsenal. We kind of saw Arsenal as a competent, well run, sort of positive example of what we should be doing. And Spurs were kind of seen as a clueless, backwards, and sort of negative example, right? Has that bridge been gapped in any way? And is that comparison maybe not as relevant as it kind of once was last year? Is this a stretch of a question? This is a great opportunity to be happy clapping. So, what would you say to that?
Jack, I think you'll always compare with your rivals, especially sort of when they have the upper hand on you, right? But I actually think there's been a lot of similarities between the two clubs, sort of down the last. Arsenal bought their new stadium. They had to sell on a lot of their best players, and they ended up turning to the likes of Unai Emery, who was a winning coach out in Spain. They turned to winners, and they got they had to transition from Arsene Wenger as well, who was there for quite some time and stuff like that. And it took them a while to transition. They brought in Arteta, a guy that a lot of Arsenal fans weren't too sure about. In fact, I remember you saying at the start of the podcast, everyone likes him, everyone hates him, bar Arsenal fans. I'd argue a lot of Arsenal fans even hate him as well, Jacko. A lot of them campaigned to get him out. But they stuck by the guy and they came out, through trusting some of their youth players that they were using in the Europa League and stuff like that to form a team around it. And they got results. And now it's a heavily backed, heavily financed operation there underneath Mikel Arteta. You look at Tottenham, We've gone in, we've built the stadium, we've come out of the Pochettino era. Again, we went looking for managers that have won stuff. Hasn't worked out. We've took a while to come out of this under, but it's took us time to get a lot of dead wood filtered out of the squad over the years, and a lot of our recruitment to come to the fore. And now that our starting 11 and some of our bench is made up by a lot of the new recruitment, you're seeing the benefits of it, and we're coming out. And I'd say right now, yes, they finished in Europe last season in the Champions League. They choked the title. But look, Jack, for us, I would say we're on an even keel. Ange Postecoglou has come in again, like Arteta, a manager that a lot of Spurs fans weren't
Yeah.
sure of at the beginning, and now they absolutely love the guy. They're fully behind it. So for me, I think this is a period now where I would argue that we're on a similar level, and it'd be interesting to see which owners have the smarts to be able to take their club onto success.
In a very short space of time, I must say we have closed that gap, though. And this is where I might say I'm quite impressed, actually, with Ange, with the players, with the bit of the business done by Paratici, of course, because I'm not going to give that much credit really to Daniel Levy here, other than actually just giving Paratici, I guess, enough of that confidence, and, kind of being able to change up the squad. Because you look at it, right? Spurs last season, when we sort of compared ourselves to Arsenal, it felt like they were a lot younger. There was this sort of like, linear trajectory that they were headed, in a positive direction. Also because, right, they have young talent, a lot of good players coming through the youth ranks. It felt like some homegrown players, from their own academy that were even representing that 11. It was a lot of sort of things that just felt like, geez, why aren't we doing that right now? And also they were playing kind of a brand of football that felt more kind of like, our own than it really did kind of even theirs to a degree. It was all sort of, kind of similar to the Pochettino days, similar to days, in the past where it just was what Spurs should have been like. And now I feel like we've closed that in a lot of different ways. It's, we've looked at our team now. The oldest player in the team is Sonny in the starting 11. He's been, of course, named the captain, but the rest of the team is pretty young, pretty inexperienced, haven't really had all that many, minutes even in the Premier League in general. Some of them feel like kind of just brand new signings, even if they came in last season, just because they either weren't really used properly or they kind of had, not a lot of things go their way for whatever reason. And it just feels like we kind of have just a new look kind of Tottenham that is kind of young, that is sort of headed in a positive direction. And also, we look at the youth academy right now. I mean, geez, it's absolutely just, chock full of talent and gives us a lot of hope that maybe there will be some more, homegrown, sort of representation from our own academy in that 11 in the future. And a lot of things, too, about how sort of the academy we even just saw yesterday is playing in kind of this Ange type style, is playing a really good, just sort of from top to bottom, a beautiful brand of football. And I just feel like Spurs, in a very short space of time, have somehow made ourselves not as much of a laughing stock in comparison, I think, to what Arsenal were. I think we, of course, need to step it up in a lot of regards and, actually put, sort of, some more evidence, in there that we are headed in the right direction. But from sort of the outside looking in, or even from, our perspective, it just feels like, Spurs look different this season all of a sudden. It felt like we're not going to be in kind of the dooms, that maybe it felt like we were going to be this summer. It's just all of a sudden we do feel a lot more kind of, kind of headed in the right direction. And I think that's thanks to, I think, Paratici's work behind the scenes and, making the squad a lot younger, a lot more talented. Also thanks to Ange, of course, and kind of getting us, that style of play and that sort of confidence in what we're doing, and also that unity amongst the fan base, which definitely also we've seen. Just being confident in ourselves is definitely gone a long way too, for sure.
But also, Jack, I'd say we've done it on half the budget as well.
Good point.
One thing I'll give their owners credit for, right? Their squad was stale. They were gung ho about getting rid of players at every opportunity as quick as they could. But
Good
when
point.
they went and spent the money, they spent massive money. And I would say players, yes, it's propelled them to where they are now. But, they have to start getting that recruitment a bit more spot on if they want to take that next step to being champions. They have to spend their money a bit better. Whereas you look at what we've done, we've had to do the same thing. We've had to get rid of a lot of drops. We just didn't go about it as quick as they did. We weren't as serious about it as they were. But we spent money a lot wiser than what they have.
That's a very good point.
You look at players that they went and picked up from the Premier League compared to the players that we've gone and picked up from the Premier League. I'd argue we've spent our money better.
Yeah.
For instance, they brought in Ramsbottom, no longer part, no longer their
Yeah.
number one. Declan Rice, over 100 million.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
has Trossard? We've brought in Madison. We've brought in
Basuma.
Basuma from Brighton, exactly. So all that, and for half the price of some of the money that they spent on some of their players. So I'd say our recruitment has actually been better.
Yeah, it has been a bit more cost effective, and that was something Spurs fans also kind of complained about, right? Was Arsenal were also spending big, and we wish that Spurs did spend bigger, but we have, I guess, seen the fruits of, I guess, kind of the spending of the past that was more, the players for the future,
Mm.
or all of a sudden, players for the now, and so we can actually, I guess, credit the work from the past, but that is something that maybe I should have mentioned, right, when I was looking or searching for things that, yeah, we need to still do better and kind of match in their
Mm.
case, would be a good example of kind of the bigger spending, right? While I think Basuma actually compares quite favorably, almost maybe even better, in my opinion, than Declan Rice, you have to think about sort of the ambition that they did have even to go after such a player and spend the money like they did, right? You just wish sometimes Spurs had that in them maybe a bit more
Yeah,
often, and that's something that I would take out of their book. That's something that
yeah.
we could look at. But I do feel like we have bridged the gap at least in some regard, and at least more so than I thought we would have. If you asked me six
Mm.
7 months ago, that's for sure. But I do have also a good yank question for you here, Dave. Tottenham have a post shot expected goal of 7.1, which puts us around mid table and 12th, whereas Arsenal's is 2.3 and is in fact the lowest in the league. Are Spurs getting away with it in any way? Could we get caught out by a better team, in this case being the North London Derby? And of course, to explain post shot expected goals just quickly, basically just
Yeah.
that algorithm that sort of just measures the goals that they do kind of expect to have gone in, the ones that ended up actually being saved or the ones that ended up actually not going in, big chances that ended up not going in that they sort of did expect
Mm.
to be turned into goals that ended up not being goals. It's just, keeping track of that sort of thing. And if you were to be really harsh, which I'm actually trying to do here, you could actually look at that as like a number of sort of maybe how lucky, you kind of have been,
Mm.
in certain games. And it looks like actually Spurs, while, having a really low amount of goals allowed, goals conceded, are a
Mm.
bit higher up there actually on the post shot expected goals, around mid table when it comes to chances that we actually should have conceded. So, Dave, are we
Mm.
getting away with it?
Look, I wonder how much of that stat is skewed with because of the United game. I remember the United
Hmm.
game, we gave them up a lot of easy opportunities.
Good point.
And Big Vic, he pulled off 6 saves, I think, in that game. It was an absolutely
It was on the crack.
unbelievable performance from Big Vic. But in the other games, I don't really remember him pulling off any like major saves. Yes, there's been a couple here or there, but I reckon that has been skewed with a bit towards the Man United game because we gave them some real opportunities. They just didn't take them, and then some brilliance from Big Vic kept us in that game. But look, Jack, we have given up some soft goals as well, right? We gave up two against Burnley. We thought the job was done. When we gave up that second one towards the end, it has to be corrected. A real winner's mindset doesn't let that happen. They go towards the end of the game against Brentford, first game under Ange Postecoglou, first game without Kane, first game with new captains. But we gave up a couple of goals there.
Hmm.
That has to be better. Um, but look, Jack, I'm not really too worried about it because the defense is better than last year. It's a new defense. They're already knitting together better than what I thought and what I imagined. Vicario is hitting the ground running better than what I thought and than what I imagined. I thought there'd be, a few more hiccups, especially with the way we like to play out from the back. Maybe gifting up a few more opportunities like that. And we're not doing that. A lot of the opportunities we
Yeah.
give up are on the break. But that's where I'd argue maybe one of the midfielders need to be a bit more clever and take certain counter-attacking opportunities down and take that
Okay.
yellow card.
I kind of feel like Spurs. I think you were spot on, Dave. I mean, I tried to throw a crazy stat at you, and I think you blew it away and came up with a very good answer there with the United scenario. That absolutely is probably where a lot of the outliers maybe come from because there were some huge chances missed in that game. And
Yeah,
you even said before, right? Had Spurs, conceded actually those chances. Are we talking about a different team, different
yeah.
momentum, different game, different scenario entirely right now? And then you mentioned that, right? So we are being
Mm.
fair. But also, you look at maybe Brian and Buemo's, I believe, too. He missed a pretty big one in that Brentford game. That could have made the game slightly different
True.
as well. But I think maybe, too, when you are playing in this type of style that we are, where we're sort of choking the team out, of any sort of possession, any sort of kind of onus in the game, we're forcing them to kind of go long. We're forcing them to play
Mm,
this sort of counter-attacking, kind of hopeful kind of brand. And you then have to just sort of take your chances whenever they do come. And they're not going to come very often. And they might be big, big chances that you end up do sort of giving away. And it
mm.
looks like some of these teams that we've come up against haven't exactly taken them, in certain scenarios. But you do feel like maybe in Arsenal, could they take those chances? And I feel like they might. And also though, we have played teams that been a different type of styles. We played at Brentford that were sitting far deeper, that were very sort of defensive, that were looking to sort of hit us in those transitional moments and those kind of counterattacks. You had the same thing sort of with a Sheffield, same thing with sort of a Fulham. But then we have Man United, have more of the game as well with Burnley and Bournemouth, who were actually playing a bit more on the front foot, and that seemed to suit us, and that seemed to actually help us a bit more. So I am curious how this will go, just in the fact that
Mm,
Spurs have conceded some big chances and have actually
mm.
gotten away with it, thanks to Vicario's fantastic goalkeeping, but also thanks to maybe some poor finishing in the opposition's case. And I'm just curious to see if Arsenal are going to have their finishing boots on. But that's what football is, right? Like, if they have their finishing boots on and if they're really ruthless on the day, that's just how it is. Like, you can't do much about that sometimes. We saw
You
that
know the
even
way
in the
these
case of
things.
Bayern Munich, right? Remember Bayern Munich on that one day?
Yeah.
Serge Gnabry finished anything he touched, and sometimes it's just like that. And you hope it's not like that. You hope we're that sort of team.
Yeah.
But that's how, also with that high risk, high reward football, it was maybe what I'm trying to say. That's what can happen. A team might just end up being really ruthless on the day and you pay the
Mm.
price for it. But something in my mind,
Look,
really.
in them derby games, any mistake is capitalized on. That's the harsh reality of it. Everyone's at their peak of their powers. Everyone is at the peak of their concentration. So
Yeah.
everyone's waiting for everyone to make a mistake. So just don't make any, and we should be all right, Jacko. But mentioning that Arsenal up at the very top of we have to take that into consideration. I said it earlier on the podcast. They're not giving up too many opportunities, too many good clear goal scoring opportunities. So, the opportunities they have gave up has actually been off their own mistake.
Yeah.
If we could put the pressure on them. But in terms of chances created on them during games, there hasn't actually really been that much. So, they don't give up
Yeah.
a lot. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's just due to them being more careful. They're maybe changing things up slightly. They're playing a bit more kind of
Declan Rice.
methodical, more pragmatic in possession. Declan Rice maybe being, that sort of, very, composed midfielder. Good point there, actually, for sure. Tottenham, though, let's give us, some credit here, have the most carries into the final third, progressive carries, and carries in the penalty area in the entire Premier League. And basically, that's just showing, right? We're giving our players a lot of chances to try to take on their man, carry it, past, the midfield, try to, really take some sort of individuality. Is there maybe more of an emphasis, do you think, an Ange's sort of system, Dave, on this sort of ball carrying, on this sort of, taking on your man type of sort of emphasis? Do you like that? Do you think players are actually given, more individuality?
100%. They're told to take the risks under Ange Postecoglou. I'd say under other managers that they were told in certain situations, don't take that risk. Take the easy pass. We want to keep possession. We want to grind them down. We want to bore them to sleep. Whereas I think with Ange Postecoglou, if you don't drive at them, you don't look to make something happen. You just won't play. It's that simple. So every player goes out there knowing they have to be able to handle the ball. But also, Jack, the recruitment. We've got players that can do that now.
Hmm.
Ben Davies can't do it. Eric Dyer can't do it. Sanchez can't do it. And I know people are going to say, but they're defenders. Okay. But Doji can do it. Van de Ven's proven he can do it. And so can Romero. You go to right back. Porro can do it. And even Emerson can do it to a certain
Yeah.
degree. You go into midfield. Basuma, he can do it. Madison can do it. Sarr can do it. The wingers can do it. Won't play. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it, you've no place. You've no place. It's
Yeah.
that simple. So there's 100% a degree on it, Jack. But there has to be. You know what?
Yeah.
With the way tactics and systems are set up now, especially in defensive shapes, and a lot of times Frank talk about it on Monday Night Football about keeping shape and being disciplined, this, that, and the other. There's no point in passing it around in front of them teams. That's what they want you to do. That's the way they're set up. You
Yeah.
have to have players that have the technical ability to be
Yeah.
able to use both feet to take them on, and that's what we've got now.
No, that's exactly what
I'd argue before managers couldn't exactly ask players to do that, Jack.
it felt like. they just didn't really trust them to do it, and it's also
Mm.
for good reason in a lot of
Yeah,
cases.
yeah,
They
yeah,
definitely couldn't, and so there was just sort of this, you got to give and take here. Like, yes, maybe the managers were a bit negative and sort of their mindset about what they felt like players were capable of, because they were also guilty
mm,
of it in the case of like a Basuma, right? They didn't think that Basuma, could be given this sort of license, and now he's been given this license. All of a sudden, look at what he can do. But then it's like, you can't really give Sanchez or clearly Tanganga, this sort of progressive on the front foot style. They're just clearly not good enough for it. And I would actually
yeah,
mention some others, too, in the case of even Ben Davies, who's been kept around, yes, and, might be a good, sort of experienced players to have around, but I don't think he's actually really, again, someone that you can really ask, to play this type of brand of football, to the highest level that you really need him to. And so, yes, this is something that I actually think is sort of caught players out. We brought it up, I think, in the beginning of the preseason as sort of the version of a swim test, right? Where they're being asked to do all these things in possession, being asked to do all these things with the ball that maybe they never used to be asked, that it's going to be, going to catch them out for their technical flaws or just their lack of ability to really play this very, high end, this very, sort of high octane sort of brand of football. And a lot of players that we felt like just continued to be given a chance and you continued to be, kept around, weren't really getting caught out, it felt like, enough for this. And I guess Ange's system has actually, in a way, done that. And also to be leading in these sort of categories, I think, in general, just as a quick side note, is just brilliant. You want to see, those sort of categories, because that just means we have guys that are brave on the ball, taking on their man, making things happen, getting the crowd up off their feet, right? That's what happens when you spin your man. That's what happens when you skill past him, on the wing, all those sort of things. They get the crowd into it, they keep them entertained, they keep them going, they keep them enthused. And these are all good sort of stats as well. It even just carries into the penalty area. I mean, that just shows, how many times, we're going in, at the opposition, right? And we're trying to make things happen in that opposition's box. We're getting in there. We're not sort of like Dave said, passing it around or anything like that, waiting for just something to open up. We're taking the onus. We're trying to make something happen. And that's all you can hope for. And just definitely forcing players, I feel like, to be brave, and it's catching other players out, and it's actually helping us in a weird way with actually the outgoings. Come to
but
think of it, yeah.
you also have to understand, why do they have Ange Postecoglou now? Because they've assessed the squad and they think that they've got enough players of the technical ability to be able to play that way. Otherwise, he wouldn't be our manager. The years gone by, I said this to you, Jacko, and I think it maybe, not with you, it hasn't gone unnoticed, but I think it's probably gone unnoticed in general. We've hired managers to suit our squad.
Yeah,
They knew that the players we had weren't technically good enough. Why do you think they brought in such defensive minded managers?
yeah,
To be able to, try and get the best out of them. And then with Conte, it was the same, but also to try and bring in some young, hungry players, redevelop it
right.
as a bit of a go between a Mourinho and a Postecoglou, and then eventually bring Postecoglou and bring attack football back here. And like this is what I've alluded to for quite some time with a lot of them players. The reason why we've suffered results we have, even against crap teams, Ennis Moura, you
Yeah,
know, Middlesbrough last year in the cup and stuff like, or the year before in the cup and all that sort of stuff. The reason why we've suffered in them games is because, embarrassingly, them teams had more technical ability in their team than what we have, and that's why we've hired certain managers.
yeah.
Now when they and when they go to hire a manager, they don't just look at what the manager has to offer. They look at what sort of squad they've got and what manager they think suits that ability.
Yes.
And that's something that hasn't been taken into consideration, and that's why we've ended up with them managers.
Spot on, Dave. Absolutely spot on. And Ange, in my opinion, is actually accelerating the outgoing process with that. I think it's
Yeah.
actually helping us out tremendously in that regard. But everybody, my computer is about to run out of power here anyways. But like I said, recording near the closet here. There is going to be a members bonus section for you guys. I'm actually just going to sort of take a question that Ribsy, I think, gave us. And please, everybody, it's going to be a silly one. But Ribsy, asked, said, can we get this one answered? We're going to do it, Ribsy. So we're going to do that as the members bonus question. Feel free to get yours in those comments down below, please. If you are a member, would love to, get it themed, at least to the ones that you guys want to hear answering, regardless of what it is. And everybody, please, like I said, smash the like button, get your comments in down below on what you think we might have missed with this North London Derby sort of preview. I feel like we're ready. We went into this sort of kind of conversation. Are we ready for this North London derby? Thought we had some good conversation out of it, some good discussion. Look out for a debate show, I believe, at some stage tomorrow. Also look out for Dave. He's going to be doing some good content with a gal. So everybody look out for that too. Dave, any final words before we wrap this up?
Yeah, look, make sure you're up early Sunday morning. The jersey's ready to go. You've got your beers in the fridge. You already know what you're having for lunch. And let's get going. Years gone by, we've gone into these games being afraid. Well, I'm adapting the team's mentality and Ange Postecoglou's mentality.
Nice
He's
one.
giving me license to happy clap, and Son says we're going in there with a different mentality and looking to win. So I'm also going in there with mentality, and so should you at home. And so should you at home. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. We never stop.
See everybody. Come on, you Spurs.